Let's get started. Call this regular meeting of Council, Town of Oliver, May 11th, 2020. Call this meeting to order. Are there any late items to add to the agenda?
No, Your Worship.
Thank you. I call for a motion to adopt the agenda as circulated. Do I get a mover?
So moved.
Move second, please.
Second.
Thank you. I'll ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. To rise and report on. Here. Adoption of prior minutes. Adoption of April 27th regular open council meeting minutes. Motion to adopt the minutes as circulated. Can I get a mover?
So moved. Second.
Moved in second. Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. I will ask Chairperson Grice to give us a report from the committee of the whole meeting.
Thank you, Your Worship. This afternoon we discovered under water matters the development cost charges bylaw update. So we're reviewing the new draft of the DCC bylaw 1390. A motion was passed that council direct staff to fine tune the DCC parks charges. So that'll come back at a later date. We also carried a motion that council directs staff to enter into the emergency support services registration and assistance system agreement with Emergency Management BC until February 1st, 2029, which is essentially digitization and modernization of ESS delivery. So that was carried. We received for information the RDOS Emergency Management Regulatory Bylaw Review Update, which is essentially a streamlining of a regional emergency management plan. And that is the end of my report.
Thank you, Councillor Grace. Move to water matters. First item is 2019 financial statements. I'll pass this over to the CFO, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The 2019 financial statements have been prepared and have been audited by our auditor, KPMG, who presented the audit findings report to council at their last meeting on April 27th. At that point in time, they indicated that there were no adjustments and no control deficiencies that were identified during the audit. We did have one minor adjustment that was going to be brought forward into 2020, and that was for the removal of an old roadway that has to come off of our books that hadn't been fully depreciated. It was the roadway on Earl Crescent, Earl and Veterans Way. In any resolve, that the recommendation is to adopt the 2019 financial statements as presented. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, CFO. Any comments, questions, council? Seeing no hands, I will ask for a motion to receive and approve the 2019 financial statements as presented.
So moved.
Moved. Second, please.
Second.
Second. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to item 2, 2019 Statement of Financial Information. Again, I'll pass this over to the CFO, whose report's attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The Statement of Financial Information is a document that must be filed annually. Usually it's by June 30th. The provincial government, due to the pandemic, has extended it, I believe, to August 31st, but we have most of the data ready. So we are bringing it forward at this point in time. And it's the Financial Information Act of British Columbia lays out specific regulations and what has to be reported on. That is council remuneration and expenses, as well as any employee that earns more than $75,000 has to be reported as well and made public. These documents do in turn get filed with provincial government. As well, it identifies all, itemizes all suppliers that we above $25,000 that we have paid in 2019. And in aggregate, the suppliers greater than 25 and under $25,000 totals approximately $9 million is what we expended to our suppliers in 2019. So with that, Your Worship, the recommendation is that council approves the statement of financial information for 2019. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, CFO. Any questions from council to the CFO? Hearing none, can I get a mover of the motion that council approve the statement of financial information for 2019?
So moved.
Moved. Second, please.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Anything to report from the last couple of weeks, Water Councillor Michelle?
Nothing, just this afternoon, Your Worship.
Thank you. Then we'll move right into bylaws. Item 1, Civic Addressing Amendment Bylaw 1320.05 for first, second, and third reading. I'll pass this over to the Director of Development Services, whose report's attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. All right, so this application before you, this is the Civic Addressing Amendment Bylaw 1320.05. The community charter specifies that council may by bylaw establish or amend street names and house addresses within the municipality. As the community charter specifies that this may be done by bylaw, it cannot be delegated to municipal staff. On substantial completion of the civic addressing update, council adopted Civic Addressing Bylaw 1320 in April of 2012. At this time, it was noted that in future years, as new subdivisions occur or corrections are made, new street names and house numbers will be consolidated into a single bylaw each year, where the map attached to bylaw 1320 as Schedule A can simply be adopted by council as part of a simple amending bylaw. So the attached bylaw 1320.05 proposes to update bylaw 1320 for addressing changes that have occurred since November of 2018. So with that, the staff recommendation is that council give first, second, and third reading to the bylaw, and that adoption of the bylaw be scheduled for the May 25th, 2020 meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. On the report that we got, it's not highlighted anywhere. I noticed Copper Road, I believe it is. Were there any other new additions, changes that we should be aware of?
Sorry, Councillor Mattis, was that Copper Road?
Yeah, that's the only one I could pick out as being new to the map. I don't know, is there other changes to the map? There's nothing that tells us what has changed, so I'm just asking the question.
Oh, thank you, Councillor Mattis. There's some smaller carriage homes, some smaller subdivisions that were done since 2018 that would have had new addresses, but yes, Copper Road would be the major amendment.
Any other questions, comments? Can I get a mover of the motion that council give first, second, and third reading to the Civic Addressing Amendment Bylaw 1320.05 and that adoption of the bylaw be scheduled for the May 25th, 2020 meeting?
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to item 2, zoning amendment bylaw 1380.14, 313 Chardonnay Avenue. First and second reading. I'll pass it over to the Director of Development Services, whose report's attached.
Thank you, Worship. Let's just start this here. This application is for a zoning amendment bylaw number 1380.14 for 313 Chardonnay Avenue. This application is seeking to amend the zoning, legally known as Lot 6, District Lot 2450S, SDYD Plan KAP 79057 from RH1 to RS2 to facilitate a 2-lot subdivision in which a single-family dwelling will be constructed on each lot. The property location map, so it's in the sort of the Tuckalnuit area, the northern end of the Tuckalnuit area of town on Chardonnay Avenue and Meadows Drive. There you see the property highlighted in yellow. 2017 ortho, you can see it's an empty lot right now. And 312 Chardonnay was the one that was subject to a public hearing and a rezoning last November. And we'll be speaking about that application here in a minute. So the zoning map, currently it's zoned RH1 with the rest of the properties nearby zoned RS2. And then RS4 was the one that I just spoke about that was rezoned last November. So the OCP, which this is sort of a key with this application, it's all low density residential here. So I want to just point that out. This is agriculture on this side, but this is all low density residential, which supports the proposed rezoning. Some photos of the subject property. So on the left is the view from Chardonnay, and on the right is the view from the intersection. Left there, it shows the view of the subject property from Meadows Drive, and on the right shows the rear portion of the subject property. And here is the property on the eastern boundary looking from the north, so looking from Chardonnay at the property. So as I mentioned, they're proposing to rezone it from RH1 to RS2 for the 2-lot subdivision. Since the proposed use and minimum lot sizes do not meet the requirements in the RH1 zone, a rezoning to RS2 is required. Here's the preliminary sketch plan of the subdivision. So you'll see that this is the entire site here where I'm outlining with my mouse, if you can see that. And then it's a 2-lot subdivision down the middle. And that'll create a lot, 531 square meters and 471 square meters. This is a map showing the neighboring lot sizes. So you can see that it's very consistent with the other lots. So 467 here, 467, they're all 467.8 actually. And then the proposed lots, one will be 531. The reason for the one on the left being bigger, most likely is the developer proposing that because of a bit of a larger setback off of Meadows of 3.5 meters. But you'll see it's consistent with the lot sizes in the neighborhood. Some of the OCP guidelines. The OCP designation for this site is low density residential, which supports the proposed rezoning. The proposal is consistent with the OCP's objective of efficient land use within town boundaries, including the infilling of vacant lots. The current proposal will convert an underutilized lot into 2 new single-family homes in a desirable area. Proximity to the hike and bike trail and Tuckalnuit Lake could encourage more walking and active forms of transportation. So staff consider that the building envelope shown on the preliminary sketch plan is adequate and have no concerns that a sizable dwelling could be constructed on these lots in the future without any variances to town bylaws. Now, so let's just get into the waiving of a public hearing. So section 464(2) of the Local Government Act states that a local government may waive the holding of a public hearing on a proposed bylaw if an OCP is in effect for the area that's subject to the zoning bylaw and the bylaw is consistent with the OCP. So in this case, as I mentioned, the proposed zoning amendment bylaw is consistent with the LR, the low density residential designation of the subject property. This means that council may waive the holding of a public hearing if desired. A bit of rationale, staff's rationale for waiving of the public hearing. So on November 25th, 2019, council adopted the zoning amendment bylaw 1380-11, which rezoned the subject property to the north to RS4. And this was to allow a 3-lot single family subdivision. At that time, a public hearing was held on November 12th, and the neighbors were given ample opportunity to speak to the bylaw with limited to no opposition voice. So with that, I note that at that time, there were 13 public feedback forms submitted, and 12 of them were for, 1 was against. The people were against the application mainly for the fact that they thought the lots were too small and that there should have been 2 lots. Furthermore, the neighborhood has previously petitioned council about the concerns associated with multifamily lots in this neighborhood and the desire for them to be rezoned to single family. So with that, the options for council is that they may choose to support the staff recommendation, they may choose to deny it, they may choose to give first and second reading, but proceed to a public hearing on May 25th, or they may choose to refer back to staff for additional information. And with that, the recommendation is that zoning amendment bylaw 1380-14 be read first and second time and proceed to the May 25th meeting for 3rd reading, and that the holding of the public hearing be waived in accordance with 464(2) of the Local Government Act, and that staff give notice of the waiving of the public hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act. I should also add too that The requirements for waiving of a public hearing will look quite similar to if there was a public hearing. So it'll still be in the newspaper, the neighbors will still get letters, and the sign will be up on the property. And then, oh yeah, that was just a map showing 312 Chardonnay. Okay, thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Director. Any questions, comments? Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. Through the director, I see no problems with waiving it. Now, what if, as you said, we go through this process, everyone gets letters? What if we get 100 letters back saying that they are against it and that they don't like the fact that we didn't have a public hearing? Is there anything we can do at that point?
That's a good question, Councillor Mattis. My understanding is what we're doing is letting them know that it's waived, but council, we would not be accepting any representations from them. So if they wanted, but if you felt they were sending messages to your email or whatever that may be, perhaps the CAO can comment a bit more at that time if we could at that point advertise instead of give third reading, if we could go and advertise for a public hearing, if that's what council wished.
CAO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to pass that over to our corporate officer. She can speak to the public hearing process.
Thank you, Your Worship. Just looking at the Local Government Act, the public hearing procedures must be held after first reading and before third. And that all persons who believe their interest is affected be afforded a reasonable opportunity. Just scanning through about the waiving section.
Sorry, just to add, I think it's basically what I had spoke about, where if council felt that there was pressure from the neighbors and being upset about not having a public hearing, then at that time we would have to advertise for a public hearing as if we normally would.
But that would only be if we don't give it third reading. We'd have to hold it at second reading in order to leave that option available.
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments? I would ask then, can we get a mover of the motion that the zoning amendment bylaw 1380.14 be read a first and second time and proceed to May 25th, 2020 regular council meeting for the third reading, and that the holding of the public hearing be waived in accordance with section 4642 of the Local Government Act, and that staff give notice of waiving of the public hearing in accordance with the requirements of the Local Government Act.
I will make that motion.
Moved. Second, please.
Second.
Any further discussion, questions before I call the question? Councillor Ventimiglia?
Yeah, thank you, Your Worship. I'm in support of the motion. I just wanted to say that I do think it's really important that the public gets their opportunity to comment on rezoning applications normally, and in this case as well. I think the reason personally that I'm comfortable moving forward in this manner, and then knowing we have the potential option to look for a public hearing in the future if need be, is the fact that, as outlined by the Director of Development Services, that we just went through something very similar in the fall with little to no opposition, and in fact petition from the neighborhood to change zoning. So for those reasons, I'm in support at this time, but I just don't want us to be giving out the impression that public opinion and public consultation aren't really important, because I think they are to all of us.
Thanks, Councillor Ventimiglia. I do also support the motion. I believe there's plenty of evidence here that there won't be any issues with this zoning change. Any further comments, questions? Hearing none, I will ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Hearing none, the motion is carried. Moving to item 3, land use procedures bylaw 1394 for rereading and adoption. Again, I'll pass it over to Director of Development Services, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. So this application here is it's rescinding third reading of land use procedure bylaws. So at the previous meeting, it was read a first, second, and third time, and that they reread land use procedure bylaw 1394 for the third time as amended, and that council adopt Town of Oliver land use procedure bylaw. So after the last meeting, it was pointed out by one of our councilors that there was an incorrect reference to a section, so that was changed. So that's the purpose of rescinding and rereading third reading prior to adoption. Basically, the purpose of the report is to repeal and replace the current land use procedure bylaw with a new bylaw that provides several updates to application processes and removes the responsibility of posting a public notification sign from the applicant to the town and its sign contractors. Just going through it here, there was, in the old bylaw, there was a picture of specifications for signs, for public notification signs and what they should look like, but now the town will be looking after that, so there's no reason to have that in there. We added some more procedures for form and character development permits so that they were suited to council's approval versus the CAO's. Added some clarification on liquor license applications to do with public notification. Removed one of the requirements for posting. It was in two issues of the newspaper for cannabis and liquor licenses. Now we're saying one because it's also required online. Basically beyond that, the rest of it's in the report. So yeah, the recommendation is that the council rescind third reading and reread it for the third time and then adopt the bylaw. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Any CEO?
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm just wondering, Randy, I'm sorry, did you happen to mention that it's being reread because we have to make a correction in it?
Yep, I mentioned that.
Okay, thank you.
Thanks.
Questions, comments, council? Seeing none, I will call for a mover of the motion that council rescind third reading of the land use procedure bylaw 1394 and that council reread land use procedure bylaw 1394 for the third time as amended, and the council adopt Town of Oliver land use procedure bylaw 1394.
So moved.
So moved. Second.
Seconded.
Further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to business. First item, 1045 Fairview Road, ALR non-adhering residential use application. I'll pass it over to the Director of Development Services, whose report is attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. This application is for an ALR non-adhering residential use for 1045 Fairview Road. The purpose of this report is for council to pass a resolution on the non-adhering residential use application to allow for the construction of a second dwelling at 1045 Fairview Road. The subject property is located in the southwest corner of the town, sort of against the urban agricultural boundary on Fairview Road and off of Panorama Crescent on the north side. The subject property is zoned agriculture by zoning bylaw 1380, and the OCP also designates it agriculture, and it's fully within the agricultural land reserve. The applicant's proposing to construct a second dwelling on the property, approximately 2,000 square feet in size, to be used as the principal residence for the property owner. The existing two-bedroom, 977 square foot dwelling will be converted into an accessory dwelling for farm labor. The total area required for the new dwelling and yard would be approximately 0.2 acres. The existing farm road along the north edge of the property can be used as a driveway for the proposed residence. So what I'm saying with that is you'll see in the pictures, there's an access. The property owners had put a deer fence recently around the entire property, and they left a gate right at the end of Panorama Crescent, and then that's what they would use to access the new house. So I'm not sure if you can see my mouse on the screen. Can you?
Yes.
Oh, you can? Okay, thank you. Yeah, so down here, this is the existing house. So it's actually accessed from Fairview Road. So you come down the property here, and then there is an agricultural structure right next to it. And the applicants are applying to build a second house up here, which would be right against the irrigation canal, and then basically convert the existing one to farm labor. Here's some photos, so this will actually make sense here. So this is Panorama Crescent. Well, this is looking, I guess, sort of southeast-ish. And you'll see that they put in the deer fence here. So on the right, it says proposed vehicle access, and then the proposed house location there. So that's looking on the left from the irrigation canal. So the property would be, or the house, sorry, would be right there. And then the photo on the right, it shows the existing dwelling with the agricultural structure. So I thought I'd talk a little bit about Bill 52. So just over a year ago, there were amendments made to the ALC Act pertaining to residential use of farmland. So with this amendment, they put the cap 500 meters squared on residential dwellings. And this does not include basements or attached garages or carports. So as per section 46 of the ALC Act, a local government may restrict this further if they so choose by bylaw. And additional dwellings, this is the key, additional dwellings must be approved by the ALC, regardless of their purpose. So previous regulations used to allow local governments to issue farm held dwellings themselves without going to the ALC, but now the ALC wants that ability to issue it. So they go through a non-adhering residential use application, and it's forwarded to council for their resolution prior to going back to the ALC. It's important to note too that if council does not support the application, then it actually just ends. It doesn't get forwarded to the ALC. So some staff rationale for support. A single family dwelling is a permitted use in the ag zone, along with an accessory dwelling for farm labor. A dwelling situated in the proposed location will have minimal impacts on the farming of a 9.3 acre property. An owner living on the farm can increase productivity and enhance security of the property. A dwelling in this location will help to act as a further buffer from the residences to the north and the farming activities that occur on the property. And the location of the dwelling allows it to be connected to the town's sewer system, thus not requiring a septic field, which would cause the removal of more trees. So with that, some options for council that they support the staff recommendation, deny the staff recommendation, or refer it back to staff. And the staff recommendation is that council support the application and that council direct staff to forward it to the ALC with support from council. Thank you, Worship.
Thank you, Director. Comments, questions, council? Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. Sorry to turn my video off. I was having some bandwidth issues there. It seems to be better now. I just wanted to comment. There's been a lot of comments in the community, especially lately, regarding lack of accommodations for agricultural workers. So I think that the addition of these accommodations are welcome. And also the fact that this is going to go through to the ALC for approval makes me quite comfortable with this. So I'm in support of the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Grice. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. It's fortunate that the director has this particular map up on the screen. My only comment is I really like the notation at the bottom in very fine print where it says irrigation channel trail. I like the trail idea along the irrigation channel there. I think that's a great idea. It would certainly enhance our parks and trail system throughout the community.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Any other comments, council? Councillor Ventimiglia?
Yeah, I would be happy to move the staff recommendation. I'm in favor of the recommendation for the reasons outlined by Councillor Grice. And in addition, I think that, what's being requested isn't excessive by any means. The main home would be a suitable size, the workers' accommodations, totally appropriate size. And so I would move the staff recommendation.
I'll second.
Seconded. Any other comments, council? I would just say before we vote, I do support the recommendation as well. I think the accommodations are well within the size limits of acceptable accommodation structures. Definitely smaller than what could be allowed. If I don't see any other comments, I will ask the question. Is there anyone object to the motion? Seeing none, the motion is carried. Moving to item 2, local government meeting and bylaw process, ministerial order number M139, I'll pass it over to the corporate officer whose report's attached.
Thank you, Your Worship. The report before council is speaking to holding public hearings electronically during the provincial state of emergency due to COVID-19. So this is to ensure that council has the ability to make land use planning decisions while following the public health officer's order that's prohibiting mass gatherings and to maintain the physical distancing of 2 meters. The province still expects local governments to adhere to the principles of procedural fairness while conducting public hearings electronically, and it enables the public to see that all of our council acknowledges and respects the public's right to participate in the local decision-making process. Providing opportunity for electronic public hearings enables council to obtain the information that's required to make appropriate decisions about proposed bylaws. So just backing up a little bit, the minister had an order which has been amended and updated. It's Ministerial Order 139 under the Emergency Program Act that enables local governments to hold public hearings electronically during the current provincial state of emergency due to COVID. So staff have been working towards ensuring that public participation in a public hearing would be easily accessible and very intuitive for the public. We have created a website page. The link in the staff report won't open the page. It's still a private page waiting for council's decision this evening or this afternoon. On that page, it'll have all the documents that are relating to a public hearing, including the proposed zoning amendment, plans, the staff report that's available for inspection, and as well how the public can make submissions directly to council. Additionally, there is a very prominent Zoom link that will remain the same. It'll be the same code and number that the public can quickly click on to access the public hearing. And with this webinar process, we can see our participants, which is council, and then attendees, and that shows people that are sitting in the waiting room that want to speak. The Deputy Corporate Officer, who is participating today as well, will be moderating those requests for people who wish to speak at a public hearing. We have tested the virtual technology through a number of our staff meetings and our council meetings, and we feel confident that the technology will prevail and will work well for a public hearing. If we do have some technical difficulties, and we're hearing today that there's been some bandwidth issues, the chair does have the opportunity to recess or postpone the public hearing to a later time or date. The ministerial order as well, just glancing through. Yes, the ministerial order to hold public hearings electronically. This order allows the council to hold it electronically. If we didn't do that, the town could face some risk challenges on jurisdictional and administrative fairness if the public hearings were held electronically without the authority provided by the ministerial order. Staff are also in the process of developing some procedural rules to maximize clarity and transparency and access for the public, as well as an internal guide will be developed that states how the public hearing will be implemented, outlining the technology that's going to be used, how to be moderated, and some backup options. I didn't mention, but if people did not have the technology for Zoom on a device as an iPad or a computer, there is a process to call in. And again, those people who are calling in would be able to be moderated and brought in to just speak at the public hearing as well. So it's addressing people who may not have computer technology for the meeting. I've attached the order for information for council, and the options before council this afternoon is council may wish to consider holding public hearings electronically and waiving public hearings as allowed under Ministerial Order 139. Council may wish to refer back to staff for additional information. The recommendation is that council, under the authority of Ministerial Order 139, direct staff to conduct public hearings electronically, and that council consider waiving a public hearing if an amendment to the bylaw is aligned with the official community plan, which you did just earlier. And I'll take any questions if council has some. Thank you.
Thank you, Corporate Officer. Any questions for the Corporate Officer? Seeing none, I will ask for a mover of the motion that council, under the authority of Ministerial Order M139, direct staff to conduct public hearings electronically, and that council consider waiving a public hearing if an amendment to the bylaw is aligned with the official community plan.
I'll move the motion.
Thank you. Second, please.
I'll second.
Second, any further discussion? Seeing none, I will ask the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Item 3, 2020 Council Policy Review, continuing with our review of various city town policies. Pass it over to this Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. Again, we're back with the opportunity to review a number of policies. I've selected 9 for this afternoon for council's review and opportunity to provide feedback to staff. The next set of 9 policies start with the municipal tree management policy right through to promotional marketing materials. So the municipal tree policy, I am not recommending any changes at this time. It was brought into effect April 23rd, 2012. That speaks to all the trees that are owned by the town of Oliver, and our responsibility relies on them. But I'll be happy to take any comments that you have.
Any comments? Councillor Mattis?
Thank you, Your Worship. I only note that further down that there is another policy, plantings new, which says refer to municipal tree planting policy. So if we are updating that, that would make it part of this. So in fact, changes would be recommended. It may not happen till later, but it's quite likely going to happen.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Mattis. Yes, I did reference that it's to review and to refer to the municipal tree planting policy. So at the same time that I'll have the Director of Operations take a look at both of those policies to determine how they could be amalgamated together, or if once the new plantings new is just rescinded, but that could come back at a later date. Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Yeah, thank you. I'm just kind of interested to know what the rest of council thinks. But I remember being caught off guard a couple of years ago when Centennial Park was sold for the hotel to go there. And we have this, beautiful list of trees that we take really good care of. And we have our policy, that catalogs things and replaces 2 for 1 when we're removing a tree and that sort of thing. But in that instance, we had a park full of old trees that we sold, which were promptly torn down, which is the point. But we, neither ourselves nor the purchaser had really had to do anything about that because the trees no longer belonged to us. So I don't even really know what I'm asking, but I'm just wondering what others think about that, and if there's perhaps some way to make sure that something like that doesn't happen in the future.
I don't see Councillor Mattis.
Maybe that's a possibility that we could write it into our policy that if the town disposes of land, that agreement would be made with the new owner regarding any previously owned trees by, I mean, that's, we could put it in the policy.
Director of Operations.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. I believe that the developer did replace several trees. I don't know how many trees are on the property right now, but it's usually part of development services to look over their landscape plans and stuff, and maybe they have to replace the same amount that they take out at least at minimum or something. But I know that quite a few trees were planted.
Through the chair, possibly we could find out that information and report back to council on the number of trees that were replaced from the Centennial Park matter.
Thank you, Corporate Officer. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you. Yeah, I mean, I'm not even super specific to Centennial Park, just in general. So I'm not that we have a huge opportunity for something like that to happen again, but I would be interested in seeing if there was a way to write that in so that in the future, if we do have a parcel of property that has trees on it that are cataloged and that we as a municipality are taking care of, that just because we get rid of that piece of property doesn't mean that we totally slough our responsibility or the developer gets to as well. I don't know what it would look like, but I'd be interested in seeing something.
Yeah, one thing that we could maybe look at is that, when a tree is removed, that it's replaced. It may not be able to be replaced in that particular spot, but it's replaced somewhere else in town. I think that was something I remember having to deal with in the city of Kelowna. If I removed a tree, I had to give parks funding for another tree, which they could plant somewhere else, because sometimes they weren't able to be planted in the same spot. That didn't necessarily cover property that was sold by anybody though. So it might be worth at least having a look.
Let's see if it's doable.
Yeah.
Thank you. Take those comments back.
Okay.
The next policy before council today is the outdoor public space naming policy. At this time, I'm not recommending any changes. This was a new policy brought into place January 6, 2020. So it's quite new, and I think it speaks well for what council was hoping to do, but I will take any comments.
I still have hands up, I think, for Director of Operations and Councillor Ventimiglia, or did you have a comment? Nope. I don't think there's any comments on this one, Corporate Officer.
Thank you very much. The next policy is panhandle access lots. The policy could be reviewed with the comment that consideration to amalgamate the information with the subdivision bylaw. But I'll take any comments.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I would ask that it also be included in the zoning bylaw. Some of these elements were already included in the last iteration of that particular bylaw, and I think it should be in both if possible, so that anyone attempting to do this has easy access to the information as opposed to a policy. Other than that, carry on.
Thank you. Parking at town office. This is a resolution that was brought into play in February 23rd, 1998 by council, outlining the parking requirements just outside the back door of town office in the regular business hours. I'm just indicating to review and bring back to council and put into a policy format.
Sir Mattis, did you still have your hand up?
I did.
Okay.
Thank you, Your Worship. I'm going to go one step further and stick it out there, and I will make the motion that the policy on parking at town office dated 23rd of February 1998 be rescinded.
Counselor Schwarzenberger.
Yeah, I was going to say the same thing, so I will second Councillor Mattis's motion. I think, you know, it goes back to a time when council may have, or councillors may have had occasion to come into the town office quite regularly, but now with electronic agendas and all sorts of things, there isn't really a need for anyone on council or staff to take one of those 4 parking spots for any length of time. So I think it's just, it shouldn't be a policy. The CAO, if somebody's habitually parking there that shouldn't be there, the CAO can ask them to leave. I don't think we need a policy for it. Thank you.
That was a second.
That was.
The second. I would agree. I think a sign could handle the job just as easy as probably easier than a policy, but I wasn't even aware of till somebody mentioned that I was against the policy when I parked there. Any further discussion on that one? I guess we can ask the question. Does anybody object to the motion that the parking at town office dated February 23rd, 1998 be rescinded? Hearing none, the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. The next bylaw or policy, pardon me, is the finance policy, permissive tax exemption policy. I am not recommending any changes at this time. It was brought into play June 18th, 2015, and I believe it's had some, I thought it had some updates, but I guess I'm wrong. But I will take any comments that council may wish to provide.
I do not see any comments, corporate officer, so I guess we're okay with this one.
Fantastic. The next policy before council, again, is a finance policy. Sorry, I'm scrolling. Typed. Well, it is the plantings, which we spoke to earlier, and we have the police cost policy, which is a new policy of councils brought in February 26, 2018, with regards to preparing for the increase in police costs in the year 2022. I'm not recommending any changes, but if council wishes to provide any comments, I'll take them.
I see no comments on this one either, corporate officer.
Thank you. I'm just having some mouse issues. The next policy before council is the proclamation policy. That was brought in January 13th, 2020. I'm not suggesting any changes at this time as it's fresh, and I think we've issued 2 or 3 proclamations to date.
Yeah, I don't see any comments or questions asked for in this one either.
Fantastic. And the last one before council this afternoon is the promotional marketing materials policy. I am suggesting to update and bring back to council. We've recently completed a branding process, which does change the schedule in particular, Schedule B, but it probably could use some updating, but I'll take some comments if council has any.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. When I read through this policy, I read it more as just as it says at the very top of the policy, administration. I see it as an administration policy, not a council policy. Many of the elements in there would, if it's council stuff, it's micromanaging, and I would like to see it rewritten as an administrative policy and then rescinded as a council policy.
Thank you, Councillor Mattis. I will do that amendment and bring it back for council's consideration.
Well, I'm just throwing it out. I don't know what the rest of council wants.
Thank you.
My comments would be, I'm in agreement. I think we've done this with a few policies already, changing them into administrative policies and getting, staying at a governance level. So I would agree with Councillor Mattis on this one. Does anybody else have any other comments on it?
I would agree as well.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. I don't see any other comments.
Thank you. And that is the last policy before council this afternoon.
Thank you, Corporate Officer. Next item, last item under business is the 2020 regular open meeting schedule that showing a couple of revised meeting dates. I'll pass it over to the Corporate Officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. As I mentioned in the report, we do bring a schedule of meetings to council each year. This year we brought it in September 2019 for approval, which council set the meetings dates for the year. For the 2020 regular meeting schedule, we had moved the Monday, June 8th meeting to June 9th to accommodate the return of travel for council members who wish to attend the FCM convention. With the cancellation of FCM in 2020, it's proposed to move the meeting back to Monday, June 8th. As well, there is still the summer break in August, and the August 10th meeting was canceled. I'm not recommending to change at this time. The September 21st meeting was canceled to accommodate attendance at the 2020 UBCM convention. At the time of me writing this report, the convention was still on the website as being scheduled for the period September 21st through 25. Possibly they'll change to a virtual convention, sure. So I'm not recommending any change at this time. And the last change that I'm suggesting to council is the December 7th meeting should have been actually scheduled for December 14th to meet the procedure bylaws being the second Monday of the month. So I attached the schedule for council to see, and I've highlighted the June date from, it was regularly June 9th, a Tuesday, and changed to June 8th. And the December 7th meeting to change to December 14th. So the options are before council to, council may choose to support the recommendation. You may choose to make additional amendments, or you can defer back to staff. And I'll take any questions that you may have.
Councillor Ventimiglia.
Thank you. Just one other change, I think. If our meetings are meant to be the second and fourth Mondays of the month, then shouldn't, I think the other December meeting should be changed as well from the 21st to the 28th, even though it's a council one because it's over the holidays.
We could absolutely make that correction as well, Councillor Ventimiglia. Thank you.
And if that's the case, then I'd move the move that we approve the 2020 regular open meeting schedule as revised and further amended and proceed with public notification.
Seconded.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll call a question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to proclamations, we have a proclamation request, National Missing Children's Month and Missing Children's Day. I'll pass it over to this corporate officer who has a report.
Thank you, Your Worship. The proclamation request before council is to proclaim May as Missing Children's Month and May 25th as Missing Children's Day. The proclamation is attached for you to take a look at. It's a fairly long one again. The options before council is to consider proclaiming May as Missing Children's Month and May 25th as Missing Children's Day. You may wish to decline the proclamation. The recommendation is to proclaim May as Missing Children's Month and May 25th as Missing Children's Day. Child Find did provide some information on some programs that they do offer, which I provided in the report that outlines that over 6,800 cases of missing children were reported in British Columbia and over 40,000 cases in Canada. Thank you. I'll take any questions that you have.
Councillor Grice.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am in favor of the recommendation. I just wanted to ask also through to the corporate officer if we'd be able to share on our social media about the All About Me kits. I thought that might be useful information for local families. Thank you.
Through the chair, yes, those are shared on our social media sites. Thank you.
Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. I am also in favor of it, but I did have a question. Is Child Find BC a corporate entity or is it a charity? And I only ask that because it's fairly clear in our proclamation policy regarding corporate entities versus nonprofits and that sort of a thing. And how do we differentiate between the two? Again, I'm fully in support of this in this particular case, but I think it's something we need to be cautious of in the future of who is doing the actual asking for this sort of thing.
CAO.
Thank you, Your Worship. Child Find BC is a not-for-profit charitable organization.
Thank you.
Any further comments? Do I have a mover of the motion? The council resolved to proclaim May as Missing Children's Month and May 25th as Missing Children's Day.
I'll move the recommendation.
Moved, Councillor Grice. Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. Does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to correspondence, I'll pass it over to the corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The May 11th correspondence report before council this afternoon. One item before council for endorsement. We received a request from the University of British Columbia to participate in a digital supercluster project, and they were undertaking a selection. We received quite late notice. We had to make a decision in that afternoon. So we chose to outline some criteria that we thought might be worthy for the analysis, and they agreed wholeheartedly. So that was in the letter that's outlined. So we'll participate in the no-cost pilot for a platform tool for all levels of government that will evaluate the policies that have been brought in by the public health officer and the economic impact all the way down to the community and municipal level. So the recommendation is before council to endorse the letter of support for Oliver to participate in the digital supercluster project.
Questions, comments, council? Does anyone want to move the motion?
I'll move the motion.
Moved by Councillor Schwarzenberger, second.
I'll second.
Seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I will call the question on the motion that council endorse the letter of support for Oliver to participate in the digital supercluster project and ask if anyone objects to the motion. Motion is carried. Corporate officer.
Thank you, Your Worship. The next grouping of correspondence items are for information only. One from Mayor James Baker regarding interest charge on deferred mortgage payments to Minister Bill Monroe. Again, correspondence from Mayor Linda Buchanan supporting British Columbia's during the COVID-19 pandemic to expand the provincial property tax deferment program to include all property owners. There's a reply from Premier John Horgan to Town of Oliver's correspondence regarding BC Hydro COVID-19 program. That correspondence was referred to Honorable Minister Ralston in Energy, Mines and Petroleum Resources. And correspondence dated May 6 from Silga. And that again is with regards to the BC Hydro COVID-19 relief program. So the motion before council is that the correspondence items listed in K2 in the weekly mail correspondence be received.
So moved.
So moved and second. I heard two there, so count 1, 2. Any further discussion? I'll ask the question, does anyone object with the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to reports, the first one we have is the Airport Manager Activity Report for April 2020.
Move receipt.
Move receipt. Second.
Second.
Any discussion? I'll call the question then, that council receive Airport Manager Activity Report for April 2020. Anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Moving to April building permits. Questions or a mover? Oh, Director of Development Services.
Thank you, Worship. I just wanted to let council know that April was a slow month for building permits, but we do have a lot of permits in the queue for some houses as well. We're obviously went through a recent staffing change, so we'll have a new inspector coming in and we'll be getting those permits out. So you should see a jump in May's building permits. Thank you.
Thank you, Director. Can I get a mover for council to receive the building permit activity report for April 2020?
So moved.
Moved. Second.
Second.
Any further discussion? Ask the question, does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. And the last report is the Oliver Fire Department monthly fire report.
I'll move
Move
receipt.
receipt.
Moved and seconded. Any further discussion? Seeing none, I'll ask the question, does anyone object to the motion? Motion is carried. Council reports, Councillor Schwarzenberger.
Thank you, Worship. I attended 2 meetings for Oliver Tourism Association, their AGM, and a Board of Directors meetings, both of which were done electronically. And then today's meetings. Thank you, Your Worship.
Thank you, Councillor Schwarzenberger. Councillor Mattis.
Thank you, Your Worship. Today's meetings.
Thank you. Councillor Ventimiglia.
Sorry, it took me a second to unmute there. On April 28th and May the 6th, both days attended technical planning and update meeting on Loose Bay. The mayor was in attendance for both of those as well. So I think that maybe if that's okay, I'll just let you elaborate on those, Your Worship.
Sure.
Thursday, May the 30th, attended Regional District. We just had a special corporate services committee meeting. Thursday, May the 5th, I was asked to participate in a Facebook Live roundtable with MP Canning. I was there on behalf of the hospital district. The conversation was around health issues during this pandemic, and then some broader community issues as well. Loose Bay came up there, of course. And we were joined by Dr. Jennifer Bejan from Penticton. It was really great to hear her perspective, and she was able to provide some insight into what it's been like sort of on the ground for local physicians involved in getting the testing center in Penticton up and running, as well as just how they're adjusting in their own private practices. Thursday, May the 7th, had regional district, and this past Friday, the mayor and I, as well as the CAO, met with Carl Meadows of Interior Health. We're trying to have these more regularly scheduled updates or communication meetings around SOGH, and I will leave it to the mayor to fill in where he sees fit on that one as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Ventimiglia. Councillor Grace?
Thank you, Your Worship. Wednesday, April 29th, I participated in the South Okanagan Chamber of Commerce Zoom call. Many resources were shared. One of note that I thought was really interesting was getyouthworking.ca, which can help BC youth improve existing skills and gain new ones through practical experience and training. There's a portal for employers as well as youth looking for employment. And also was shared, the Penticton Chamber of Commerce website has some great webinars that are available for anyone, such as easy ways to work remotely and communicating effectively in a crisis. So that might be something you'd like to check out. Wednesday, April 29th was the Oliver Tourism AGM. The new board was elected, so congratulations to them. They've also launched a new website to visit oliver.com, so make sure you check that out. Thursday, April 30th, I attended a GovLaw webinar. It was of particular interest to me because they were covering the topic of why the Victoria plastic bag bylaw failed and how it could be drafted differently today. May 1st, I attended the Okanagan Basin Water Board webinar, launching their new website with the updated flood maps. Tuesday, May 5th, I watched Councillor Ventimiglia in her virtual town hall on Facebook, so I thought she represented Oliver well. Thursday, May 7th, I attended another BC EDA webinar. They've made updates to the resources on their website, including a condensed BC recovery toolkit, which I've shared with the rest of council and staff, and today's meetings. And that's the end of my report. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Grace. Yeah, April 28th, technical planning conference call on the Loose Bay campground. That one was largely had to do with the Loose Bay Society that disbanded and left some questions about the opening of the Loose Bay campground, but the RDOS has stepped up and is doing the heavy lifting around health and safety protocols and managing the campground. Last I heard, there was about 50 people up there. About 40 would be considered campers or potentially homeless people that have moved in there, and about 10 fruit pickers. That was probably a week ago I heard that, so I'm not sure the current conditions on that campground at this point in time. On April 30th, I was able to get a conference call with James Mack from the Agriculture Ministry. Been trying to get that call to happen for quite a while through the weekly calls to Selena Robinson, and was able to finally connect with them. And the main reason to try and get that call was there just seemed to be a real disconnect with the ministry understanding the uniqueness of the domestic farm workers and the community that moves into the South Okanagan and the challenges associated with it. He did admit that they were more focused on the silviculture, and they were definitely going to be taking this as their number one priority. And throughout that call, or by that call, I was able to schedule a larger meeting, which happened on May the 6th regarding Loose Bay, and the Agriculture Ministry was there, RDOS, the BC Fruit Growers Association, AgSafe BC, Interior Health, area directors, mayors for Osoyoos, Keremeos, and myself. Steering committee was established during that meeting, a smaller steering committee to address domestic farm workers coming into the South Okanagan. And the group is going to report back to the larger group on initiatives and actionable items moving forward. So the word from the ministry was that this is their number one priority, and they expected that the ministers themselves would probably be speaking about this. They did have some funding that was available, and they were looking for places where they could put that funding. They didn't have an endless amount of funding, but they were looking for places where they could put it that would do the best good. On May the 4th, the CAO and I had a meeting with Superintendent Brian Hunter, and he brought down a corporal from Penticton. Actually, he's working out of Keremeos, Corporal Brian Evans. So Brian Evans is moving into the Oliver RCMP sergeant position that has been vacated by Blaine Gervais. He's moving in there on an interim basis while there's a posting going out for a permanent sergeant in the Oliver area. The process is expected to take about 6 months to fill. The RCMP are looking for a career sergeant to bring here. If they're unable to find somebody, they will look for a promotional opportunity for somebody again, about 6 months to get a person moved into the area. What else here? And on May 8th, we met with Carl Meadows, Councilor Ventimiglia, and the CAO. Discussion topics included South Okanagan General Hospital, the Emergency Department, and the Penticton Regional Health Hospital and their emergency department, and how those two departments could work together in the future and support each other better. So it sounds like there's some real progress going there. Some of the players in South Okanagan have stepped up and are going to start having more regular meetings. And Carl seemed very optimistic that we were moving in the right direction. COVID-19 was a discussion as well, and the PCN process, which has unfortunately gone a little bit on hold because of the COVID-19, but still on the radar of something that needs to move forward quickly. And I did have a quick conversation with Richard Cannings this morning. I guess he has an opportunity to speak tomorrow, and he's going to be bringing up the Gallagher Lake siphon to see if any of the money that the government is trying to get out to generate some or stimulate the economy is actually might come forward for that. We also talked about the arena, and without any funding, I said we can only do one of the projects. If we had some funding, we could probably do both, and both are pretty much shovel-ready projects. Or the Gallagher Lake siphon for sure is shovel-ready, ready to go, and the arena isn't far from that if we were able to get some funding for that. And it appears the federal government is looking to get that infrastructure money out into the country. We'll just see how eager they are. Upcoming meetings, the next one is May 25th, 2020. Acting mayor's schedule for the rest of May is Councillor Mattis, and June, July, and August is Councillor Grice. Public question period. I see we have one attendee. I'm not sure if there's a question to be asked. I don't see a hand up. So we'll move on to looking for a motion to adjourn. Can I get a mover?
So moved.
Moved, second.
Second.
Second. Does anyone object? We are adjourned. Thank you, council.
Thank you.
Thank you.